Antonio Brown was supposed to spend at least a year and a half behind bars in Kent County, but that was before he came to the aid of a Kent County corrections officer being attacked by another inmate.
We checked his head out, dude, no blood, but he was gasping for air. So we cleared his pipe, pulled the gum out of his mouth, and started CPR.
Breathe, 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 you know. That's what we were saying.
So instead of trying to flee once the deputy, who was having severe problems breathing, this inmate decided to try and save his life. The officer was choking while he was supervising a work crew outside of the prison. So it was actually really easy for the convicts to just walk away and be free. So we all know that prisons house a lot of really bad people who have committed horrible crimes. While some would argue that people can't change and reform in prison, hence the reason why thousands of inmates will never get the opportunity to leave. Well, there are some who can change and learn from their crimes. So in this video, we're going to be talking about some convicts who, instead of joining in on attacks or just sitting back and watching while something horrible happens to prison guards, well, they finally make the right decision and help save the guards' life. Well, how's it going, you guys? I'm your host for this one, Landon Do Not Sing, and welcome back to another most amazing top 10 video. Alright, let's get right into this one. This is convicts who have saved a guard's life. Alright, so starting us off with this one, we have a group of inmates at a Phoenix jail who attacked a female prison guard. The officer was doing a routine cell check when she was tackled by another inmate. The inmate jumped onto the female prison guard from behind, pushed her down, and then bit her ear. He went all Mike Tyson on her.
I was getting ready to do a search and I told him to come out, and as he came out I walked in, and then the next thing I know he jumped on my back and pushed me to the ground and bit my ear.
A group of inmates Harris keeps tabs on heard her cry for help.
Is this real life right now? What kind of animal do they have locked up in Phoenix? Lucky for this prison guard, other inmates took notice to what happened.
So I ran up the staircase, ran out my sandals. They were all over the place, ran up there. And while I was running, I heard her scream.
I noticed that she had blood like real thick around her ear.
I felt him being pulled off of me, and I knew that they were over there helping me.
I guess there are some really good people in prison who have reformed. I mean, if it wasn't for the inmates who came to her rescue, who knows what could have happened. It's so scary to think about. I don't know if I would work there ever again if an event like this just took place. Moving on to another instance, we have Daryl Mumford, who is an inmate at Bullock County Correctional Institution. Daryl and County Correctional Officer Oscar Vickery, well, they were out on a work detail when they were driving a vehicle to pick up some solid waste to dump at a dump site. Well, Mumford noticed that the officer was swerving on the road. Mumford was trying to talk to the guard to see if he was alright, and when he asked if he was alright, there was no answer. So that's when Mumford took over, and he was able to put the truck into neutral, and then he pulled up on the emergency brake and was able to bring the vehicle to a complete stop. Mumford then called 911 for help. So the officer was passed out, and if the convict never took notice, the vehicle would have crashed into something, potentially killing them both. But luckily the convict did something about it. He reacted quickly, putting the car into neutral and stopping the vehicle. And after he stopped the vehicle, the convict, he could have easily just ran away, but instead he stayed with the officer and called 911 and made sure that he was being helped. If the convict was thinking for himself and just took off, who knows what would have happened to the officer. Alright, next up we have inmates who saved a Georgia's corrections officer's life after he fainted from being overheated. Take a look at this.
First we took his gun belt off and let his gun belt to the side, and then we pulled his vest apart, and then we figured we better take it off in case I had to do CPR on him or something like that, because he was in bad shape.
They found his phone in his pocket and dialed 911.
Okay, so these inmates literally had access to a gun and vehicles. They could have easily escaped and would have been armed. But instead, they found the officer's phone in his pocket and they dialed 911.
Even though they wear stripes and he wears a badge.
They really stepped up in a time of crisis and showed that they care about my officers.
At that moment, the officer they consider family was hurting.
If it wasn't for these quick decisions made by these inmates, the officer would have died. Next up, we have a very scary moment when an inmate walked up behind an officer and wrapped a towel behind his neck, trying to kill him. Chaos pursued. It must be so hard to be a correctional officer, especially at a supermax prison, because prisons just seems to be super unpredictable, to say the least. Many convicts are in prison for, murders and other horrific crimes that result them in staying in prison for the rest of their lives. So I guess some of them, their mentality is, well, what else can happen to us? I mean, we're already in here for the rest rest of our lives. Well, for this officer, this chaos and this attack from behind didn't lead to his death. Luckily, other inmates took notice and they got involved. You would think that many of them would see the officer getting attacked and they would join in on attacking the officer. You wouldn't really suspect that these criminals, these convicts, would join on the side of the officer to try to get the convict off of him. So other officers were called in and the situation was quickly diffused. The convict who attacked the officer was just 22 years old, and it was an unprovoked attack, which just goes to show you that anything can happen at any time. Next we have this guy right here. This is Antonio Brown. He saved a female county jail corrections officer after she was attacked by an inmate. Antonio Brown saved this guard just hours after he was sentenced for his own crime. He was sentenced to 1.5 years up to 5 years in prison after he was caught eluding and fleeing officers. Brown found himself in front of a judge again, and the judge had this to say: "You intervened at your own peril and pulled that individual off of her, probably saved her life and protected her from him attacking her again. So because he put himself in danger and saved an officer's life, he was immediately released from the Kent County Jail." I mean, what a story. Hopefully he can avoid committing more crimes in the future, and maybe he can save more lives. Next up we have this. Take a look at this clip. Okay, so this inmate just went crazy. He was attacking this officer. He actually lifted him up and then slammed him to the ground. He just body slammed him. Like, this guy's watching way too much wrestling. That inmate was just way overpowering. The officer seemed to not be able to do anything. He was just powerless. Well, another inmate took notice of what happened. Take a look at this. Okay, so this guy came up from behind the convict, and without notice, he bear hugged him to get the inmate to stop swinging punches at the officer and to try to get him off of him. Other officers managed to help out as well, and together with the 3 officers and the one really big convict, they were able to restrain the crazy guy, the crazy inmate, and get him off. Things could have went really bad if the other inmate didn't help out. I mean, he could have just sat there and done nothing. Okay, moving on to this next one, we have a group of inmates who was able to rescue a female corrections officer who was nearly raped by a prisoner. So this took place at Rikers Island. We've talked about this prison many times. It's one of the toughest prisons in America. Well, this took place inside of a watch post. The inmate was able to get inside and close the door and lock it, while another inmate was able to break the plexiglass and squeeze his way inside of the room. Once inside of the room, the convict opened up the door so more inmates can get inside and help the female corrections officer out. So the attacker was 27 years old, and he was currently serving a 5 to 10 year sentence for raping a 10-year-old girl. And at this moment, he almost raped another person, but luckily these convicts got involved. The whole thing was caught on camera, but it wasn't released. Okay, and now we're on to our last clip. This last one I want to talk about. We've talked about it in another video, but here's an update to the story. There was a guard who was having a heart attack. Well, convicts in jail took notice and they broke out of their holding cell to help the guard.
And you're careful.
Said I've been doing this for 20 years.
Gary Grimm never thought the men he was tasked with watching would actually watch over him.
I get emotional.
This guard was very emotional because he never thought the convicts would actually want to save his life. It would have been pretty easy to just do nothing and have this officer die. A lot of convicts don't like police officers because they're the ones who, they arrest them and they have the task of keeping you in jail, and they have so many rules. Let me just show you guys a clip of the inmates breaking out.
But as Nick Kelton and other inmates told us then, they soon realized the 52-year-old was suffering a massive heart attack. They yelled, banged on their holding cell for minutes, and eventually broke free, not for themselves, but for their guard.
It's really scary to know that the convicts was able to break out that easily, but this is one of the few inspiring stories that take place inside of a jail cell. The convicts yelled for help, and when help finally came, all of the inmates just quickly walked right back into their holding cell without any trouble.
Of overtaking me and taking my gun and killing me, or taking somebody hostage or whatever and escaping, they looked at me as a human being.
Deputies finally noticed the commotion in the basement. First responders arrived soon after.
And then they had to shock me twice to get my heart restarted.
I think this is a great place to end this video. I just want to say thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys all in the next most amazing top 10 video.